I'm Bonnie Fulford, Executive Director at Volunteer Prince William. And before we get started, I just want to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. Our mission is to meet community needs through volunteer resources. I kind of look at it this way. We match volunteers, and through doing so, we empower nonprofit organizations to have the resources to do their job better, the outreach piece or the the office piece, whatever they need help with. So we work with volunteers and we work with nonprofit organizations, including the ARC of Greater Prince William. Our tagline is, "It begins with the power of one." I always tell people, particularly young volunteers, don't think that one person doesn't make a difference, because you do. We have a number of programs that come under our umbrella. One is Senior Corps, and that is particularly for volunteers who are 55 and better, as I like to say. We have a volunteer coordinators network for all those aforementioned nonprofits and their volunteer coordinators to come together and share best practices, and we have a speakers bureau. We line up speakers to come in and talk to that group to provide them with information that's appropriate for what they're doing, volunteer management, and those kinds of things. And our other program is the Alternative Community Service. The Alternative Community Service program is with the Office of Criminal Justice Service, and we help people who are trying to pay off fines or owe the court some hours, sites where they can work off those hours. And last but not least, we provide disaster services to Prince William County, Manassas, and Manassas Park, with mostly education and outreach. So today, what you all came here for is our program called Recipes for Disaster. And it's about feeding your family when you don't have a power source. But I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Simmons, and she's going to tell you how it also is a useful information to have during COVID. And then we have a video for you to watch, and they're going to actually make food. When we do this in person, just so you know, we actually serve you food. So I'm sorry we can't do that today. All right, Kathy, I'm turning it over to you.
All right, good morning. Are you seeing me?
Let's see.
Okay, good, because I still have Bonnie in front of me, so I wasn't sure if you could see me or not. So I also work at Volunteer Prince William. I worked in Fairfax County, Department of Fire and Rescue for probably 25 years. And I retired from there, and I live in Prince William County, and I always wanted to work in the community where I lived. So I took a job with Prince William County Emergency Management and worked there for about 12 years. And that's really where I met Bonnie and was introduced to the Volunteer Prince William organization. So when I finally decided to retire for the second time, I thought, okay, now I can really retire. And then the current executive director called me and said, "Is there any way you could come work for us for a little bit, just part-time, a couple hours here and there? We really want to beef up our disaster programs and do more community outreach." So they hooked me, and so now I work part-time for Volunteer Prince William. And my friends go, "What are you doing? How can you even be busy right now? Nobody's doing anything, nobody's working." And Bonnie can tell you, we have probably worked more hours since this COVID pandemic started than we work in a normal time. It's been, people are looking for things to do. Opportunities for volunteers are a little bit different today, but there are still a lot of them out there. So this community outreach is one of the things we haven't had a lot of opportunities to do recently. So I'm really excited to be here today and to talk to you all and share the news about this program. Our program is called Recipes for Disaster, and we're really going to talk a lot about food and cooking and that kind of thing. But the message you're going to get consistently today from Bonnie and myself and the speakers on the video is there's really three things you need to do to be ready for any kind of disaster. First is to be informed, to kind of know what kind of things you might face, to know where you're going to get information during a disaster, know which information is credible. This has been a perfect example of how we have a major disaster with all different kinds of information being thrown at us from various places. And So it's hard to decide sometimes, is what I'm hearing or reading, is that true? Maybe it was true last week, but things have changed today, and so it's no longer true. So knowing where you're going to get information is really important. Having a plan, knowing what you and your family is going to do during a disaster. And your plan may be different depending on the kind of disaster you're facing. Traditionally, we talk about disaster preparedness. We're talking about things like tornadoes and fires and power outages and flooding. And this is a very different kind of disaster. And when in the past we talked about pandemics, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about pandemics because we hadn't experienced one to this level, and I'm not sure people really felt like it could happen. So this has been a really different opportunity to practice our emergency preparedness. And the third step is to have emergency supplies. And there's all different kinds of supplies that you should have to be better prepared for disasters. And you'll hear a little bit about that today. But one of the most important is knowing how to feed yourself and your family. So this program today talks about recipes for disaster. It'll talk a little bit about food safety. We will talk about the kinds of foods you should have on hand that would be easy for you to prepare. Sometimes if you don't have power, you really need to rely on non-perishable food. But in this situation we're in now, we do have power, so that's not as much of an issue. But if you remember back when this pandemic first started, traditionally, anybody have any idea what the things that they run out of first at grocery stores during disaster? In the winter, when they're predicting a heavy snowstorm, what do people go to the store and buy up first?
Bread, milk, and eggs. Toilet paper.
Janelle?
I'm sorry. I would say probably like canned goods or water.
Okay, water is a perfect example. People get water, they're afraid they're going to lose their water at their home. They may stock up on their canned goods. What else are they going for? Anybody have any ideas? Think about, have you rushed out to buy something when you knew you might be stuck at home for a couple of days during a snowstorm?
Well, this time it seemed to be toilet paper, cleaning products.
Absolutely right. And toilet paper is a regular on the list. People they run out, they get milk, they get bread, they get toilet paper. This time we added cleaning supplies. And in fact, you know how long we've been in this situation, and it's still difficult to find a lot of the cleaning supplies. Toilet paper is back in good supply most places, but cleaning supplies are still tough to find. So having supplies on hand ahead of time will at least get you through the first couple of days, couple of weeks of whatever the disaster event is, and we'll get you started. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is what kind of supplies you might want to have on hand. Jan, yeah, you're still here. So at the end of this, I believe we're going to send out, we have a booklet. I'm not sure if you can, it's probably back. Is it backwards? Of course it's backwards, because it's like you're looking in a mirror.
No, it's frontwards for us.
Oh, you are? Okay, for me it's backwards.
Yes, I'll be sending out that and a survey and a link to the video also, the whole, because we're recording this now. So,
and that's great. And so we'll talk a little bit more about this booklet later, but it includes a lot of the information that you're going to hear today. So it'll be a good reinforcement, and it gives a lot of additional information that's good for you to have on hand. So having said all that, I'm going to turn it back to Bonnie so she can introduce our video and get us started on that portion of the program.
Okay, we're going to test my technological skill, see if I can do the share screen appropriately. I think that's the right one. Yes. Okay. This, you're going to see a young woman we worked with from the Virginia Department of Health named Sarah Greenslade. She was a big help in this project.
Hello, my name is Sarah Greenslade, and I'm a nutritionist with the Virginia Department of Health WIC program. I want to spend some time today talking to you about emergency preparedness. How would you prepare for an emergency? Say you couldn't get out of your home because the roads were blocked or icy, trees down. What would you do? What would you need to be prepared for an emergency? Hopefully by the end of today's program, you'll have a better idea. What I want to talk to you about is how to prepare food-wise. What would you need for you and your family? How much? What kinds of foods should you be storing in order to be prepared? The two kinds of foods that you're probably going to want to have around are your shelf-stable foods and your staple foods. Shelf-stable are going to be your canned goods. So these are your items that are already cooked, already ready to go. They don't really need any kind of preparation or any kind of special storage. You don't need a refrigerator or anything for them. These are your canned jar goods. Then there's your staple foods. These are going to be things that run out when you hear a hurricane is coming. Your bread, milk, eggs, dry cereals, those kinds of things. So your shelf-stable foods, you won't necessarily have them in your kit, but you want to make sure that they're always around in the house because they're not going to store forever, but they're good to have because you don't need a refrigerator, you don't need to cook them, you don't need to do anything special to prepare them. So what I have here is kind of a sample kit, what it would look like if you were to be totally prepared for you and your family to eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a snack for 3 days. What I want to do by the end of this program is for each of you guys to come up with a SMART goal. That is something that is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely to prepare your family. What would you need to do? How much would you need for how long? So, specific. What is the goal? A ready kit, a preparedness kit for your family. What is measurable? How much do you need in order to make sure you have enough for your family? Next is attainable and realistic. So all we're asking is for 3 days of food for you and your family. And if you gather them occasionally over time, then you'll be able to get what you need in an attainable and realistic fashion. The last thing you want to do is set a timetable for how long it'll take you to accomplish this goal. So what we recommend is 10% of your food budget go to preparing your preparedness kit. So whether that's $5, $10, $7.25, whatever it is that's realistic and attainable for you, set that up and then break it down into how long it'll take you, whether it's a month, 2 months, 3 months, because being a little bit prepared is still better than not prepared at all. So the SMART goal, I want you to, as we go through this program, think about all of those specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely things that we're going through. And by the end of the program, leave here today with a plan, with coming up with your SMART goal. And we also have information at the end of the program that gives you ideas for recipes, snacks, and a food list to go shopping with and base it off of your family's preferences and needs. The next thing I want to talk about is maintaining food safety. So the last thing you want to happen is during an emergency is get sick. If you can't get out to the doctor, you're already in a tough spot. So what do you want to do to stay safe and healthy with you and your family if you're stuck in your home? This is easy. Keep washing your hands. Maintain good hand washing. Also make sure that the surfaces you're preparing your foods on are clean. And we'll go into this a little bit later on with the food demo. You also want to make sure that if you do still have electricity or a heating source, that you're cooking your food thoroughly. This is really important because it'll be a disaster. It'll be a whole other disaster if you get sick. The last thing you want to think about with regarding food safety is making sure that the item that you're cooking or preparing hasn't expired. So with canned goods, the expiration date is usually right at the top or the bottom of the can. But make sure that if it's getting near expiration, that you go ahead and use it. And then the next time you go to the grocery store, just restock whatever it is that you've used. So periodically go through your emergency preparedness kit and make sure that everything is up to date. As mentioned, I said that we were going to prepare you with recipes, sample recipes, to give you an idea of the kinds of foods you want to have for your emergency preparedness kit. Next, we're going to demo one of those recipes, the corn and bean salad. Super easy, super delicious, and it's just from the kit that we have here. So stay tuned. Welcome back. As promised, we have a food demo for you, and the recipe that we are demoing is the black bean and corn salad. So here are the ingredients. As you can see, it's not many. They're mostly canned goods, so it's going to be relatively inexpensive and full of flavor, full of nutrition for your family. The basic ingredients, we have diced tomatoes, black beans, and corn, some vinegar, olive oil, and spices, and it's good to go. So what we want to start off with, first, food safety. Clean surface, make sure your hands are cleaned, washed. If in the instance you're in an environment where you can't wash your hands or you don't have a clean environment, having just regular kitchen gloves, disposable gloves around could be beneficial to use. Another thing you want to keep in mind is a lot of your canned goods might be sitting around in your kits for a while, so they can collect dust and gunk. So I have a wet paper towel, wipe off your lids before you open up the cans. With the canned corn, we're just going to open that up. All of these items we're going to drain because it's kind of going to be like a salsa. We're going to use it as a dip. So you don't want it to be too runny. So we're just gonna drain this here and dump it on in. Make sure we get everything. Our other items we opened up ahead of time. Alrighty, so once we've finished draining this, it looks like there's a lot to drain. We just dump that on in there with the corn. Last canned product we have are our tomatoes. Drain those, lots of good vitamin C in here. Alright, and again, dump them right in. And I have a can of chicken here. We're not going to put it in this demo, but if you wanted to add that in for a good complete protein, you can add that in as well. Totally adaptable and up to you. So now we need our vinegar and olive oil. It's going to be 2 tablespoons of vinegar. 1, 2, and 1/4 cup of olive oil. This is full of good, nutritious fat that'll help you feel full, but not guilty. All right. And last but not least, to give it some flavor, our little preset pack. So what this is just a teaspoon of pepper, a teaspoon of garlic powder, a teaspoon of onion powder, and a teaspoon of cumin. So a teaspoon each of the spices, and we just dump those in there as well. And now we just stir it on up. Now, like I said, we call it a salad, but we're gonna serve it kind of like a dip or a salsa. So once we get it all stirred up, we're just gonna serve a little into a bowl. And we have some good corn chips here. And this is easy. You don't need utensils. You don't need anything fancy to eat it. Just dip and delicious.
Hi, I am Bonnie Fulford. I work for an organization. I'm going to talk a little bit about water. You need to have 1 gallon per person
me see
per
if I-
day of water in your disaster supplies kit. Remember,
Here we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I was gonna just insert a few comments before we started into this, but I was slow on the mouse to click it. I can, oh, if I back up, I'll back up too much. This gets more into just general preparedness, as Kathy was talking about earlier. Did you want to add anything before we run this part of it, Kathy?
No, I don't think so, unless anybody has any questions about any of the information that they just saw before we move on.
Okay. And we can go ahead, and then if you have questions about either segment, we can take them at the end. And I'm gonna dissect a disaster supplies kit for you here in this next piece. So I'll go ahead and get it started up again.
Number 2, that water has an expiration date and you should not store it in sunlight or on concrete. If you're going to put it on your basement floor, put a layer of cardboard between the plastic and the concrete. In the rush of a disaster, it's easy to get anxious and confused, so I'm going to break it down into 3 simple steps of ways that you can be prepared. The first thing I wanted to talk about was ways to stay informed about a disaster. And the best thing that you could have in your household is one of these NOAA all-hazard radios. It doesn't play music, can't listen to the baseball game, sits there quietly until the National Weather Service issues an alert. And then it has a tonal alarm, and it's kind of loud. It would wake you up in the middle of the night, and you would be advised of what the disaster was or what the issue was: severe thunderstorm, tornado, hurricane, and you would be able to enact your emergency plan at that time. So this is a NOAA weather radio. I also wanted to talk about other methods of staying informed. If you have a battery-powered or crank radio in your disaster supplies kit, it will enable you to stay informed if your power goes out. Additionally, Prince William County, Manassas, and Manassas Park, all 3 have an emergency alert network. In Prince William County, you can go on the county government website and sign up for the alert network. It's called the Prince William Community Alert Network, or as we refer to it, PWCAN. Social media is another way of staying informed, but I want to caution you to be careful and make sure that you're getting your information from secure sources and not something that somebody put on Facebook that's he said, she said, this happened down the street. You can tune into the county government website or the city websites to get the most up-to-date information. And if you're signed up for those alert networks, you can get text messages sent directly to your phone. So those are 3 different ways that you can stay informed before, during a disaster, before, during, and after a disaster. The next thing I wanted to talk about was making a family plan. You know, a lot of times in a disaster, our local phone lines aren't going to work as well as the long distance phone lines. It's a good idea to have what we call an out-of-town emergency contact that everybody in the family can call and check in, and that person can kind of be the keeper of the information. So choose somebody who is located outside of our area. Make sure that you have, not only have the phone number programmed into your phone, but have a hard copy. Write it down. So many of us are dependent on our electronic devices today. You want to have a hard copy of some of these emergency phone numbers, and that person can relay the messages between family members. One of the other things you're going to have to think about in a disaster is whether you're going to stay or you're going to go. If you, what we call shelter in place, you would stay at home during the emergency, and you will now be prepared to eat for the 72 hours that you're home. But if you decide that you need to go, you're going to want to have a disaster supplies kit packed that you can take with you. That needs to be incorporated into your family plan. Depending on what time of the day the disaster occurs, if your children are in school and you're at work, you need to have that plan prepared so that you know how to get in touch with each other, where you're going to meet. It's a good idea to have 2 meeting places. One immediately outside of your home in case you need to evacuate for a fire or something of that nature, and another meeting place where you all know that you would go if you can't return home. Say there happens to be trees down in the road or a forest fire and you're not being allowed to return to the neighborhood. Where would you go? What would be the most logical place for your family to meet? In terms of making a plan, everybody's plan is going to be unique. If you have small children or infants in the family, if you have an elderly member in your family, if you have someone with disabilities, if you have pets in your family, your plan is going to be customized to meet your individual needs. After you get that plan together, you can begin to think about what else you need to have in your emergency supplies kit. So I was going to go through a couple of items here that are useful and can be life-saving in some instances. The first thing every emergency supply kit needs to have is a first aid kit. Small or large, it's going to have items in it for those bumps, scrapes, bruises, and small medical mishaps that you'll need to take care of. The next item is a flashlight. You're going to want to have a flashlight. Be sure that you have batteries, extra batteries for your flashlight. And when you're buying batteries for your different devices, make sure you get the correct size battery for the correct device. Different flashlights take different size batteries, as do the NOAA. The NOAA radio has battery backup. You want to make sure you get the right size batteries. I mentioned earlier the hand crank radio. This is very handy because you don't have to have a power cord with it. You can crank the radio and it will run off of batteries as well. When you're tuning in to your radio, WTOP and WMAL are the emergency alert networks in our local area, and those are 2 good places to stay tuned into with your hand crank radio to get the latest updates and information. One of the other things, this is really handy, it's not only a crank radio, it also has a light, and you can plug your cell phone into this. So when you're looking for items for your kit, look for things that you get the most for your money. Once you've charged this and you crank it, the light will stay on for up to 6 hours. Another thing you need to include in your kit that goes right along with that family disaster plan is important documents. These would be insurance papers, deeds, titles, things like that. You also want to keep medical records, and you also, if you have pets, want to include their medical records, their vaccination records in with your important documents, and keep copies of those documents in your disaster supplies kit, so if you have to evacuate in a hurry, you have all of that located in one place. Some other important things to have in your kit: you want to have a bag of extra toiletries, toothbrush, deodorant, toothpaste, and some toilet paper to take along with you. You'll have to decide when you're preparing your plan what your evacuation plan is. In a disaster, shelters may be open, but you, depending on your circumstances, may want to evacuate to a friend's house who lives out of the area. Duct tape, it comes in colors now. Always comes in handy. Gloves in case you have to move any debris. An emergency poncho, if it's raining outside, it'll help to keep you dry. Have one of these for each member of your family. The little headlamp with the light on it so that you can see and have your hands free at the same time. I like to have some vinyl gloves just to protect my hands if you have to do a kind of an icky cleanup, and some wet wipes, which if you have infants, you probably have these already, but if you don't have power and you don't have water, these are useful to help keep clean. If you have medicines that need to be refrigerated, it's a good idea to have a cooler or a cold pack that you can store those items in until you get somewhere with refrigeration. Bungee cords are always handy. An emergency whistle is a good idea. You can toot on a whistle a lot longer than you can yell for help. So it's a good idea to have a whistle in your disaster supplies kit. Some other items, a Swiss Army knife. All kidding aside, it's got just about everything you need. It's got the blade, it's got a Phillips head as well as a straight head screwdriver. A utility knife, wire ties, a tarp in case you need to cover up a broken window or something. An emergency blanket, you can have one of these in your vehicle so that you have it with you all the time. You should have a smaller version of this kit in your car as well. And it's nice to have a few hand tools, hammer, needle nose pliers, wire cutters, and a wrench. Those are all things that will make a disaster a little bit easier on you and your family. One of the other things that I don't want you to forget is if you have pets, you need to have a pet first aid kit. Food and water for your pets as well. This is a foldable, so it's nice, it folds up. You can keep it with your disaster supplies and always have a bowl handy for your pets. It's a really good idea to have a picture of your pets. It's an even better idea to have a picture of you with your pets. If you should become separated during a disaster, it's a lot easier to show a picture at the shelter than it is to try to identify your animal by saying, I have a little brown dog or a little black dog. There'll be many of those located in the shelter after an emergency. The most foolproof method of identifying your pets is to have them microchipped. When they have a microchip, they also get a tag that goes on their collar that indicates that they have been chipped. Have an extra collar and an extra leash for them as well, so that it's in your kit, and if you have to go, you've got it handy. That wraps up the emergency supply kit. I want to remind you that there's for more information and more details, you can call the number on your screen, and stay safe.
Oh, I have to turn it off. Wait a minute. Can figure out how to do that. Here we go. Stop it. Okay. And I'll come back to. Can you hear me or am I muted?
Can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay. First thing I want to say is that number that was on the screen, don't call that number. Nobody answers it anymore. That was a position that they don't have there anymore. But there are lots of places to get additional information. So I have to admit it was excruciating watching myself do that. I wanted to fix all the ums and ahs and misspoken things, but that kind of covered it and gave people an idea of what kinds of things to have in a kit. And Kathy, did you have some more to add after that? And the picture of the booklet was, we have a new one.
Okay. Oh, okay. I have to confess, I get a little bit of pleasure out of watching Bonnie introduce herself in a video. Just as kind of my quirky sense of humor. So anyhow, I mean, lots of good information there. I forget, it's been a little bit since I've seen it. I forget how much good information is in that video. I wanted to talk for a couple minutes just about the booklet you're going to get. And this is the one that I showed earlier, the recipes for disaster. So inside It's got lots of information. It's got information about how to prepare for an emergency. It's got some very specific guidelines about how to store food and water safely while you're storing your supplies. It talks about things that you should be doing before the power goes out. If there's a storm coming or there's a disaster that you might be concerned about losing your power, some really good tips for things you can do before that happens to make your perishables last longer, and some tips for what to do after the power goes out when it comes back on again. There's a really nice chart of how to decide what food you should toss or what food you can safely keep after you've lost power. That's a question we get all the time, and the health department does as well after disaster, going, oh, I lost power for this amount of time. Is it safe to keep this? Should I toss it? I guess the safest answer is anytime you're not sure, the best thing to do is toss the food. But there are some good guidelines here to help you make that decision. We provided a sample menu for 3 days of breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 3 meals a day, and some snacks. And we have menus for those dishes that we recommend or we suggest as our sample menu. And then at the very back, there's a shopping list that you can use to build up your emergency supplies for food. So as she was saying earlier, you may not be able to get them all at one time. Maybe pick 3 or 4 or 5 things off the list, and every time you go shopping, add a few more to your disaster supply kit. So I think this book will give you a lot of information and be very easy to use at home. The last thing I wanted to talk about just briefly is how to get food during this particular disaster with COVID. If you're in a situation where you need help with getting food, there are a number of resources in our community that are just wonderful and are going out of their way to provide food and supplies for anybody who needs it, whatever their situation is. It's the umbrella organization is the Prince William County Community Feeding Task Force, and they have a food helpline that you can call. They have call takers that speak English and Spanish. And when you call, they'll get your address. They'll ask you some questions to determine your needs, your family size, if anybody has any special requirements. They'll then be able to look up and find the closest food pantry to where you live. If you need transportation, if you need food delivered to you, they're all good resources and they can help guide you through that. And if for some reason your situation is beyond what their capability is, they have other resources that they can refer you to get help. So that's a wonderful group. It's actually a partnership between ACTS, Action and Community Through Service, Volunteer Prince William County, the cities of Manassas and Manassas Park, and the Prince William County Community Foundation. So there's a lot of players in this partnership, and they're doing wonderful things during this this COVID pandemic that we've experienced. I think that's about all I have, Bonnie. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add or if anybody has any questions that they'd like to follow up with.
That covered everything that I wanted to touch on. If anyone has questions, we could take those now.
Do you have the link to the food line? You know, where people would get in touch with that?
I have the phone number for that,
Okay.
703-794-4668.
Would you repeat that, please?
703-794-4668. They're open Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. We do have information on our website, volunteerprincewilliam.org. So that's another place you can refer folks to, but that'll get them straight into that food helpline.
Okay, thank you.
I should have made a PowerPoint slide of the phone number. We could have put that up. Note to self.
Hindsight.
Next time around.
Yeah.
Any questions?
I will mention there are 60 food pantries throughout the county and the 2 cities. Many of them have been ramped up by houses of worship to meet the local need. We started out, I think there were 42, and some of them are the ones that you know already, the usual places, but more have been pulled together to meet the need. Okay, I'd like to think that we just covered everything.
I don't see anything
for
coming up
witness.
in the chat room.
And did you, I was just wondering that I need it, but I was wrong. You said the number is 703-794-4668.
Janelle, could you speak up a little bit, please?
What was the number again? Not that I need it. I was just wondering what the number was. So if someone else needed that.
For other
The food-
people who might need it, the food helpline?
Was it 703-794-4668?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, please share that number.
Bonnie, is your organization part of the, I don't know the correct name for it. I'm going to call it the food rescue, where restaurants that have food that they have to donate and people can sign up to go and pick up the food from the restaurants and then take it to the food banks that can be distributed to the people that need it?
That is actually a program of ACTS. They call it Prince William Food Rescue. However, we do play a role in that we recruit volunteers for them. And so we help them out by recruiting volunteers. But yes, that program has been instrumental in moving the food. And I want to point out that, while there's been CARES Act money donated and they're able to get large donations of food and able to pay for quite a bit of this food, that food is all moved by volunteers. So without the volunteers, that food ain't moving, and it's going all throughout the community.
I'm seeing a lot of that on Facebook, the volunteers that are posting about it,
Mhm.
saying, sign up, this is a great organization, and seeing a lot of great things with that program. And it's new, correct? Like a year old?
It was about a year old when COVID hit, which was such a blessing because they already had the model designed, and they've been able to scale it up as the need has become bigger and bigger. And, my hat is off to Aaron Tolson and everybody in the ACTS organization at how they really stepped up. And that food rescue program, what's cool about it is it's an app on your phone. And if you sign up to be a volunteer, you'll get a pop-up on your phone that says there's an order that's ready to be picked up, and they'll give you the address and you can accept it. And that takes it down off the screen so 6 people don't show up at the same place to pick up the same order. And then it tells you where you're taking it. So it's, and that's one of the cases where technology has been our friend.
Bonnie, we were talking about this at our staff meeting yesterday. I was just scrambling for my notes. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I wrote down is that as of yesterday, that food rescue has rescued 5 million pounds of food that would have been tossed out and gone nowhere. So that 5 million pounds of food has been picked up and transported to places where that food can be used by people in our community. So that was just amazing to me that they've been that successful and continuing to grow.
Yeah, it was the brainchild of Steve Liga, who's the executive director at ACTS, that, because they have a hunger prevention center, and, because he realized there was so much waste from restaurants and grocery stores, that he wanted a way to be able to put that food where it needed to go. And they created this program, and it's amazing. In the beginning, it was all to stop the wasting of food, and now, while it's doing that, the focus has kind of shifted along with the pandemic.
Do you know how many restaurants are involved in it, Bonnie?
I do not know, but we could find out.
I'm just curious, that how many.
I know there's several in Old Town Manassas that participate,
Okay.
but I don't know throughout the county. Some of the restaurants were actually cooking for some of the meals that were being delivered
Mhm.
because, in the beginning, they couldn't open
Right.
for the public to come in, but they were staying active. I could find that. That's a good question, Jan. I want to find that
I'm a little
out
curious.
myself.
I want to know too, so send me the message.
Yeah, because
Okay.
if there's a restaurant on there, I mean, is there any way to get a list? Because if there's a restaurant we know, a local restaurant, maybe we could get them involved too. If they're not already.
Right, yeah.
And for me, I'm more likely to go to a restaurant that's participating in some kind of philanthropic activity. That would be, if I was making a choice, I'd choose one over the other. I will find that out, Jan, and I will email it to you and you can share with the group. How's that?
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? It's a quiet.
I want to thank everybody and Jan in particular for inviting us to do this. It's fun to see faces, even though you're all on the screen. We haven't gotten out much lately.
No, we haven't. It's the only time I've seen Rhonda, and we co-sponsor so much. The only time I see her now is on screen. And Janelle, we miss, but Janelle volunteered here in our office until the pandemic. She answered phones, delivered mail. We loved having her. We miss you.
Thank you so much, and I miss y'all, and I can't wait to come back. I'm just waiting, and it's terrible because of this virus. We just gotta be patient, like you said.
Yeah. Well, it'll happen. It will happen. We'll see you again.
Of course.
So, anything else before we say goodbye to our lovely presenters? It's nice to see you, Bonnie and Kathy.
Good to see
And I'm
you as
so
well.
sorry we're not doing the conference this year.
I do have a question.
Yeah,
Is there another workshop coming up in another week or so? I know there's more workshops you sent me. I can't remember it now.
Well, next week there's one a Wednesday evening, I believe. It's Medicaid waivers.
Okay.
And then on the 23rd, it's Pizzi is doing a workshop. And Pizzi is the Parent Educational Advocacy Training Center. And they do workshops, and they're doing one on Your Voice Matters. So as a parent, how you can become empowered to participate more. And then on November 13th, we're doing the new Autism Umbrella with Dr. Joni Johnson. She's a fabulous presenter too. And then, what is it? November 18th is Erin Clemens, who's a pediatric occupational therapist.
Now, Ms. Jan, I want to let you know, you said there is one, but there was one you said coming up with the Medicaid waiver. I think I have to do a movie night that day.
That's movie night for you, yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah, but this is,
I
yeah, I think it might be one that you wouldn't be as interested in. But the others, I think you might be interested in, okay?
Okay.
Okay. So.
Before
And
we
we
go,
may have one on Special Needs Trust coming up. I'm just not, I don't have a date. We want to
That
talk
would be
about
a-
Special Needs Trust and ABLE accounts. I was hoping to do it October 30th, but having trouble getting back the speaker to get back with me. So
that would be a good one.
it is.
Before we go, I want to give a shout out to Kayla for all her technological assistance.
Thanks, Bonnie. I'm happy to help.
She's a godsend, even though she's in Colorado now.
Oh my goodness.
She's still working for the ARC, even from Colorado.
Thank God for that. I should be so happy, Miss Kayla.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
We miss you.
Oh, Miss Kayla. Also, we are having another meeting later, and I know you'll be doing that too. So.
Yes, we have book club this afternoon.
Okay. Thank you, everybody who came. I hope you got a lot of information out of it. I certainly, I missed the last time you did this, presented this. So even though I don't get to taste the food, which would have been great. But I have the recipes, so I'll have to try some of them
Try it
at
out.
home,
The-
and
the-
I will
it's-
share them with everyone. So
Good, thank you. The food is genuinely tasty. I've tried a couple of recipes out of there, so it's, it's not just PB&J. It's,
I'd be
Although I-
happy with PB&J.
I like PB&J myself, but after a while you want some variety.
Mhm.
All right, well, thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.